you wanna bet that I can get you back inside your head before the summer ends and spread a little love. Just for a little fun, I'll make you come back to me before the rise of every sun. Baby, it's meant to be, I know you got a man, but he don't understand. You're gonna be a heartbreaker. You're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette. 'Cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah.
Welcome to Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit, and now here's your host, Rich Barris.
Welcome to Inside the Numbers, folks. I am your host, Rich Barris, the People's Pundit. All right, before we get started here, we're going to go a little bit in a different order. So we're going to recap. If you haven't seen on Twitter, Locals, Getter, Truth, basically everywhere, running a little poll. Tell us what you think. National polling or state level polling? At this point in the presidential primaries, which one would you rather see? Basically, which one interests you more and which one would you rather see us do more of? We have, in fact, started to dip into the states. We are going to keep a national trend. So in truth, no matter what happens, it's going to be both, right? Because we need a national trend. And typically, states follow the national trend anyway when it comes to presidential primary polling. And that's actually true of presidential polling in general. All right. But before we get started, all right, So go vote, go do what you got to do. All right. Let us know which one you prefer. All right. So the other day on Twitter, if I can get, and I'm going to have to use this one, my elbow will be messed up in a day. Watch this. Get these ergomatic mice that actually work pretty well. But the other day on Twitter, Joe Biden said that he wanted to, and if I can't get this going, then I can't get this going. Here we go. Hey, there it is. Joe Biden said on Twitter the other day, and you know what? You can barely see that. So let's go ahead and just show it to you. Ban assault weapons. Require safe storage of firearms. Require background checks for all gun sales. Eliminate gun manufacturers' immunity from liability. We can and must do these things now. All right. So for people who don't understand this, for decades or haven't heard this, especially number 4 right there. Okay. For decades, the left has attempted to hold gun manufacturers accountable, liable is the word, the legal word, for gun deaths that transpire. So there's a mass shooting at Parkland, whatever rifle was used or handguns were used, hold that gun manufacturer accountable. This is without a doubt an indirect way to abolish the Second Amendment. Okay. What do I mean by that? And by the way, there have been juries in civil cases who have held them accountable and awarded them money in the past only for a judge to overturn the jury verdict because the judge obviously knew what it meant. And what it means is destroying gun manufacturers forever. Gun manufacturers give the people the means to exercise a right that is outlined, enshrined, ratified, codified in the Second Amendment, in the Bill of Rights. And that, of course, is the Second Amendment. So if you can't repeal the Second Amendment, which they would never be able to do not in this environment, then the next best thing is to destroy gun manufacturers. During the Obama administration, they went to banks and they made it difficult for many gun sellers, resellers to do business with financial institutions. Again, another indirect way to destroy the industry without being able, because you cannot repeal the Second Amendment. Right now, I'm not saying they can never do this. And I'm telling you, eventually they will do everything in their power to repeal the Second Amendment. So for this time being, what's the next best thing? If gun manufacturers are held liable for Parkland and other, you know me, I can't even stand talking about the individual events because I understand that media is a contagion in mass shootings. Look, the Second Amendment was ratified in December of 1791. The phenomena that we know social scientists refer to as mass shootings is a modern day phenomenon. I'm not going to spell out the event, but it is widely accepted that the modern phenomena of mass shootings began in the late 60s. I'm trying to be generic on purpose, with a certain event that happened at a certain school, college. I'll say that. So the Second Amendment has been around hundreds of years before we became mentally unstable and began taking out our frustrations on innocent people with firearms. The second thing is require safe storage of firearms. Anyone who is a firearm culture, gun culture person knows that that is obvious. People, not everyone should have guns. That's true. People who are not qualified or trained to responsibly own, store, and operate a firearm is one of the most dangerous things in society. There's just no doubt about it. However, like Jefferson said, every right you have is assigned an equal or greater duty. You want the right to defend yourself, you have the duty to learn what the hell you're talking about. And when it comes to this issue, unfortunately, many people who weigh in, who offer their opinion, simply don't know anything about firearms at all. This is coming from somebody who was born in New York, loved the Big Apple, lived most of his early life in New York and New Jersey, and now wouldn't move back there if you paid me. Because they know nothing about the gun culture. The North largely knows nothing about real gun culture. Now, there are obvious exceptions. But in the South, the culture is different. In the West, the culture is different. And there's a lot of opinionated people in the North who just really don't know what they're talking about. They ran the hunters, the field and stream, culture out of their part of the world a long time ago. So it got me thinking. And actually, honestly, while I'm watching the show, I'm prepping for the show, and I've had this in the barrel, pun intended. I've had this segment in the barrel now since Joe Biden did this, and we were actually working on it before. Because the truth is, you have gun manufacturers that they want to take immunity from, yet Big Pharma is granted immunity all the time. They're immune from damage from Fauci's use. No problems. So it got me thinking. Let's honestly have this discussion. Which is more dangerous? And ironically, a lot of people don't realize that the CDC actually tracks this data. The CDC will actually track data on firearm deaths. So let's go to the latest. I found this great layout by Pew Research, and you can go through the sourcing if you want. But for the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, does in fact track gun deaths, and they have them in all various categories, whether it's gun violence, whether it's suicide, and there's a third, more obscure category, but we're going to get into it. Forget about this. How many people die from gun-related deaths in the U.S. each year? Because it dawned on me, which is more dangerous, firearms or Big Pharma? Laura and I have this game where we watch TV, and when we're watching TV, the commercials for Big Pharma come on, and then they tell you all about the side effects and everything. And we have this like really funny game. It's like, which side effects are worse? Can you follow along and see? And, there's just some of the more ridiculous ones that includes, death. Oh, in rare cases, death, whatever. All right, so let's get into it. In 2020, the most recent year for which complete data is available, 45,222 people died from gun-related injuries in the U.S., according to the CDC. That figure includes gun murders and gun suicides, along with 3 other less common types of gun-related deaths that are tracked by the CDC. Those that were unintentional, those that involved law enforcement, and those whose circumstances could not be determined. The total excludes deaths in which gunshot injuries played a contributing but not principal role. The CDC fatality statistics are based on information contained in official death certificates, which identify a single cause of death. So when you see other trackers at the Washington Post and others, who, by the way, changed their definition of what a traditional mass shooting is. They did that recently, just a few years ago under Donald Trump. It has widely been defined. The acceptable definition is 4 or more. The Washington Post believes they know better, and they decided, so if you ever look at the Washington Post tracker for mass shootings, know that you are being duped. That they are absolutely fudging the numbers to inflate who is and who isn't killed by mass shootings. By the way, they did this with lynching when they were pushing the lynching legislation by Kamala Harris and Cory Booker because they had no real legislative accomplishments to speak of and decided that they were somehow qualified to run for president anyway. So they got together and put together a federal anti-lynching bill, and everyone began changing how a lynching is described and characterized. We also went back and did a detail on that. You might want to check. I don't even know what episode number that was. It was a long time ago. But that data might surprise you as well. What share of the U.S. gun deaths are murders and what share are suicides? Though they tend to get less public attention than gun-related murders, suicides have long accounted for the majority of U.S. gun deaths. Let me read that again. Though they tend to get less public attention, what they mean is the media hides this reality from you. Suicides have long accounted for the majority of U.S. gun deaths. You think that may be the first hint that we have a mass mental illness issue? You know, we got to get John back on, John O'Shea. He wrote an amazing piece about first of all, gun violence in general and mental health. An amazing piece. We should get John O'Shea back on to talk about it because that is the first hint. If you're killing yourself, that is a final, final act to show that that person was indeed suffering. In 2020, 54% of all gun-related deaths in the U.S. were suicides, 24,292. Why is this important too? Because the media touted how 2020 was a record-breaking year for gun deaths in this country. A record-breaking year. Right, maybe because you locked people in their homes and they blew their brains out. Just like the Department of Transportation found that drinking and driving, that drug use and driving skyrocketed during the pandemic and the immediate aftermath of what was done to our economy. Destroy somebody's business they've been building maybe their whole life. They tend to get a little suicidal. Make it so a man can't pay his mortgage for his family, he might get a little suicidal. Take away the dignity of work from a man, they may get a little suicidal. Raise your children in this nutcase culture, and they may grow up to be a little bit suicidal. Hell, I'm from the culture. I'm from the generation. I remember the advent of grunge. There were otherwise healthy kids ready to follow Kurt Cobain into the grave after he killed himself. Obviously, there's something wrong with our society. 43% were murders, 19,384 according to the CDC. The remaining gun deaths that year were unintentional, 535. And there's no such thing as an accidental discharge, death related from it. There's a reckless discharge. There's no such thing as an accidental discharge. You discharge your firearm unintentionally, and you were being reckless. Period. End of story. There may be something called ignorant discharge, which falls under reckless. Don't handle the firearm if you don't know what the hell you're talking about. I'm also old enough to remember the current president of the United States, then the vice president of the United States. I am not muted. I am old enough to remember when the current president of the United States, then the vice president, told people to walk out on their porch and blast a shotgun off in the air in, their communities. Get a shotgun, man. Get a shotgun. That kind of an idiot probably has no business anywhere near a firearm, let alone calling for bans on things he doesn't understand. What share of all murders and suicides in the U.S. involve a gun? Nearly 8 in 10, 79% of U.S. murders in 2020, or 19,384 out of 24,576, involved a firearm. That marked the highest percentage since at least 1968, the earliest year for which the CDC has online records. A little over half, 53% of all suicides in 2020, or 24,292 out of 45,979, involved a gun, a percentage that has generally remained stable in recent years. It's just easier, right? But it doesn't mean you're not going to do it. Prior to a certain recent event that was a mass shooting at a public school, the greatest mass murder at a public school did not involve a gun or a firearm at all. It didn't. It involved a bomb. So people will find a way to do it. And by the way, when that event took place, gun laws were more lax than they are now. Yet that individual still chose to use ordnance. Why? Because he wanted maximum casualties. So how have they changed over time? Well, the 45,222 total gun deaths in 2020 were by far the most on record, they put, representing a 14% increase from the year before, a 25% increase from 5 years earlier, and a 43% increase from a decade prior. What are these stats missing? The fact that most of the murders, not the suicides, are done in urban, blue areas, and the perpetrator use handguns. So immediately this call to ban assault weapons. What's an assault weapon, Joe? What's the definition of an assault weapon? Do you know? Do you think AR stands for assault rifle? I guarantee you he does. Geraldo Rivera does. He just said it the other day. As crime in inner cities goes up, obviously this number is going to go up. And by the way, in reaction to Parkland, what did Rick Scott do? He immediately took away the rights of an 18 to 21-year-old American citizen from owning a semi-automatic rifle. They're still old enough to sign up at the Marine Corps recruiting station or the Army or anywhere else. They'll stick a gun in your hand in a heartbeat. But when they get home, they can go to boot camp at 18. They're going to learn how to properly handle various weapons, M4s, M16s. They're going to be responsible, respectful of that firearm. Yet when they get home to visit their mother and father, they can't purchase one. It's outrageous. It makes no sense. It makes no sense. The truth is, these mass shooting events are great for media and coverage. They love it because they hate the Second Amendment. They know their coverage inspires new shootings, more often than not deadlier than the initial event, because the media is a contagion again. But the fact is, they don't want to report about what the real issue with gun violence is. We have a major problem in urban areas with crime and violence, and we have a major mental health problem in this country. Again, automatic weapons, which were outlawed in the first half of the 20th century, automatic weapons still, folks, even with the ability for 200 years to obtain whatever you want. And then later, of course, with the advent, of technology and First World War, these automatic weapons were very much at your disposal. There still weren't mass shooting events. It's us. It's not the law. There's something wrong with us. And for Joe, for your, I know you were like a D student in college, but when the Second Amendment was ratified, you could own anything you want. It absolutely did pertain to anything. If you had the money for it, you could get it. There were private citizens who had what are basically versions of ironclad ships, early versions of ironclads, fully stocked with cannons and everything, Joe. So I don't know what the hell you're talking about. Ernest Hemingway was looking for Germans off the coast and literally was drunk out of his mind with a Thompson submachine gun, fully automatic Thompson submachine guns, and grenades on his little skiff. Popping pins and throwing grenades to try to hit submerged German U-boats that may be spying in the harbor. And yet still, there were not mass shooting events. The problem is us, not the firearm. And it got me to thinking anyway. Let's just stop and pause there for a second. And I'll send out that link to everybody when we take our first break. I'll send that link. It got me thinking. Compared to Big Pharma, nuances involved in everything. Which is more dangerous? Big Pharma gets immunity, basically. Or at least they do on vaccines. They got immunity. Who's really dangerous? And we just perhaps accept them and scapegoat one and just accept the other. For all the talk about the NRA, the NRA lobby is weak, relatively speaking. When it comes to influence peddling on Capitol Hill, the NRA is weak. They mobilize people, and most of the time, the pro-gun vote mobilizes itself. There is really no anti-Second Amendment vote. Anytime the left's ever tried to take this issue on like that, despite what the polls may say, there's always a knee-jerk reaction, in favoring stricter gun control laws after a mass shooting event because of the media coverage. But generally, if you drill down on people's beliefs, they will tell you that stricter gun laws does not prevent these mass shootings, nor will it even prevent crime. They have to lie about the assault rifle ban from the 90s that expired. It did not. Even Eric Holder's Justice Department concluded it was not successful. Any reduction in those incidents, they didn't know if they could attribute it to the availability of lesser round magazines or economic prosperity, because the truth is, violence goes up when the economy is bad. When people get more desperate, it doesn't surprise me at all to see that in 2020, gun deaths skyrocketed between suicides and crime. When a government imposes a lockdown and halts commerce by force, people are bound to get desperate. Deaths of despair are named that for a reason. Let's take a look at Big Pharma. Let's compare Big Pharma. So these are injury facts. Found this resource to be great. For the last 2 years, preventable drug overdose deaths. And don't think about this as like an overdose death from a guy sitting on a street corner. That's not what this is. Overdose deaths increased 58% over the last 2 years. 62,172 in 2019. In 2021, that number was 98,268. 98,268 people died from preventable drug overdoses. That's an increase of 781% since 1999. You know what else increased 1,000-fold since 1999? The influence that Big Pharma has on K Street. The power they have over congressmen and women. These deaths represented 92% of the total 106,699 drug overdose deaths in the United States, which also include suicide, homicide, and undetermined intents. Again, so what are you telling me here, Rich? The majority of people who overdose and die in America every year are not like dying on the corner with a needle in their arm from a street drug, an illicit street drug. Oh, absolutely not. They're dying from something that has the U.S. government stamp of approval on it. This chart allows you to compare fatality trends by drug type, age, and gender. When comparing deaths involving different drug types, multiple drugs are often listed for one death. Because of this, the fatality counts by drug type are not mutually exclusive and should not be added together to calculate totals. We better watch that, because as I was doing research, I was seeing people play with those statistics. You could seriously inflate stuff. So while there is certainly an effort to inflate and exaggerate, embellish the gun issue, right? That is also true on the other side of this. The majority of preventable drug overdose, 77%, involve opiates, totaling 75,785 in 2020. Folks, if you haven't seen the documentary The Pharmacist, you probably should. It wasn't some regulator who finally identified the scourge of prescription opiate abuse in this country, and how Big Pharma was allowed to impose it on us without any resistance from those regulators, from lawmakers, from any electeds, from any leaderships. None of that. It got started with first one and then a group of pharmacists who second guessed the wisdom of these doctors to run these pill mills in exchange, often for cruises, other vacations, incentives, otherwise known to you and me as a bribe. So remember that the next time you blindly trust the guy in the white coat. Frank Luntz, hired by Purdue Pharma to run around the country, convincing everybody that OxyContin's not addictive, paying doctors to do what appeared to be public service announcements, which of course they were not, but they took that format. There's a difference between being dependent and being addicted. You should not have to feel a stigma if you don't take your medicine and feel a little crummy today. Don't worry, another little pop of Mother's Little Helper will set you right again. And you can do it with my stamp of approval. I'm your trusted doctor. And hell, if I was wrong, wouldn't some authority figure have something to say about my dishonest comments? The drug category most frequently involved in preventable opioid deaths and growing at the fastest pace is synthetic opiates other than methadone. So we're talking about oxycodone, hydrocodone, things like that. Which, if you care to learn, is actually kind of fascinating. It comes from the other set of alkaloids in the opium poppy that is non-morphine. The alkaloids that for years many people thought you should discard, until some crazy chemist one day decided, let me change the molecular structure of these and see what happens. And then boom, he synthesized oxycodone. This category includes fentanyl analogs, and tramadol, which, by the way, for years was pushed as a safe alternative to opiates. Tramadol. The fentanyl category of opiates accounts for 67,325 preventable deaths in 2021, representing a 26% increase over the 53,480 total in 2020. You might think, oh my God, because fentanyl is coming across the border. Actually, fentanyl first started popping up in these statistics when they manufactured what was called a fentanyl patch. And you were supposed to wear this patch like you wear a nicotine patch. And little by little, a moderate dose of fentanyl gets absorbed in your body because you need very tiny doses of fentanyl to reach any kind of efficacy. These idiots would cut up the fentanyl patches and put them in their mouths and suck it all out as fast as they could. And then the next thing you know, boom, they're overdosed. Get the Narcan. A non-opioid, the psychostimulants category, that includes methamphetamines, accounted for the second highest number of preventable drug deaths, claiming 31,607 lives in 2021, a 37% increase from the 23,022 deaths in 2020. The opiate category that includes morphine, oxycodone, hydrocodone, natural and semi-synthetic opiates was involved in 12,133 preventable deaths in 2021, a 2% increase from 2020. All right, obviously, guys, I haven't stated the following yet, have I? And look at how little heroin is, by the way. These are because the overall preventable overdose category, illicit heroin off the street is rather small. It's a rather small share of the overall problem. The real problem is manufactured in a big pharma lab. And you may have noticed that I am not talking or even touching the tip of the iceberg of faulty drugs that just kill you. Because they have side effects that you hear on the commercials in between shows that you don't really pay attention to. This is a great new drug. It could prevent my eczema from coming back. Oh God, how horrible is the eczema? It's so embarrassing. Why don't we, Big Pharma, appeal to the vanity in Americans? And stroke is a side effect. Oops, good news, you're never gonna get eczema again. Because you're dead. But congratulations. Laura's laughing her ass off in the other room. But because, yeah, in rare case, about 2% of these cases, sudden death did occur. Talk to your doctor if you have any. Talk to your doctor if you like to breathe air on a daily basis. If you breathe air on a daily basis, you may be subjected to Bell's palsy after you have a stroke. We're not even talking about that stuff yet. This is like obvious drug use, like benzos. You see benzos for people who don't know what that is. Benzo is like diazepam, lorazepam, Valium, and Xanax, which I think I had it backwards. I think that's Xanax. Benzos are incredibly addictive and very, very dangerous, especially when mixed with other things like opiates. I did find it funny for people who are pointing this out. I don't know who died of cannabis either. I don't know. I'm sure it's happened. A little over 1,000 people, apparently. Look, there is a pharmaceutical form of, and because that's what it would be. What's called, Laura? Maritol, Manithol, something like that. In these states where you can get a prescription for marijuana use at because I did know some veterans who wanted it, but it's federal and like they couldn't get it. And if they did, they'd lose their firearm permit. But I forgot what they offered them. It was Marathon. Somebody in the audience probably knows what I'm talking about. And technically you can absolutely overdose by taking them. But I don't know who smoked themselves to death. I could be wrong, but. And of course, the elephant in the room. The elephant in the room, vaccinations. Obviously, I got to walk a little bit of a line here. Marinol, thank you. Oh, there it is. Sorry, I wasn't looking at the viewport. Marinol, thank you, KC985. Because I'm like 99% sure you can overdose on Marinol. I mean, you can overdose on anything, technically. But what about drugs that are designed to keep you healthy from something? like Fauci juice. There are now more people. You go look at the Rasmussen survey yourself. Go back and look at the public polling projects tracking on vaccine status and severe adverse effects. And repeatedly, I'd get, a 3 to 6% range. That's minute. That's really just outside the sampling error. The sampling error is 2.1%, number one. So it's not always just outside the sampling error. It was upwards of 6 points out of the sampling error at one point. Very clear relationship with age, meaning the younger, the more likely you were to report a severe. And then what percentage of those people, we never asked in a way where we said, okay, that was you personally. You experienced either none, no effect, mild, moderate, severe. Obviously, the people who experienced death can't take the survey. So we have to look at others, the work others have done. And in truth, when it came to severity, we were right on the money. Since new studies have come out, since even the government themselves have released their own data, we were right on the money, folks. 3 to 6% ballpark is a fair estimation. And people would say it's so small. I'd say, what the hell are you talking about? We're talking about millions and millions and millions of people. So the truth is, even if we're excluding that kind of pharmaceutical death, accidental death, that's not even close. Guns aren't even a blip on the radar compared to these people. The difference is they have a lot more money to stuff in the pockets of politicians like the president. And he just so happens, like every other Democrat, to hate the Second Amendment. But hell, folks, on the relative scale here, gun deaths don't seem to be our immediate problem. Our immediate problem is that we're killing ourselves and we're looking for different vehicles to do it. Did you see suicides on there? Pills and a gun. Obviously, very close to an equal number of people decide those are the best ways to go. The real stink here is that, let me give you an example, is that they're allowed to do it. One is allowed to do it. The other one is hunted like a dog. Is there a right to poison people in the Bill of Rights that I don't see? Because see, I've read over the Bill of Rights quite a few times. See, right there, almost at the top, is the right to keep and bear arms. And those gun manufacturers you're trying to strict immunity from as a way to end round repeal the Second Amendment, they're simply providing you a means to exercise your God-given and codified by man right to defend yourself. Without them, you wouldn't be able to do it. It would be a pointless right. If they ever were successful in stripping away immunity, making gun manufacturers liable, if they were ever successful in that, the Second Amendment means nothing because you will have nowhere to get a firearm. Nobody will make it. They'll bounce. They'll close their doors. They'll shutter the windows and they'll leave because they're not going to be responsible for you not properly raising your child and having that psychopath go out and mow down other children. Whether it's because they're trying to one-up the nutcase they saw on Fox News being lavished with attention, or because they don't know what the hell gender they are and they decide to take it out on people of faith. The truth is, proponents of the Bill of Rights don't have the money that these other people have. So they're allowed to poison you. It's that simple. I'm watching, getting ready for the show, What was the name of the show that I said, what the hell is that? God, it's like so prescient. Devoured. And I'm listening in the background. It's about BlueBell accidentally giving, what's the hell the name of that thing? Listeria. And at first, I mean, yes, the CEO was charged with a felony because the Department of Justice said he was hiding it. Bottom line here, 3 people died from the listeria that was in BlueBell ice cream. They're shut down. It takes 3 years for their profits to return to the levels they were at before. The CEO is prosecuted criminally with a felony. The company gets a bunch of misdemeanors slapped on them, but the Justice Department said, aside from the CEO, there was no evidence to suggest there was an intent to defraud or deceive public or officials, right? Or regulators and officials or something. Except outside of the CEO. 3 people who had serious illness. One couldn't even connect the listeria to BlueBell, by the way. It's just that he had a grocery receipt. Had a lot of problems. If you get listeria a lot, if you're healthy, you'd be all right. Problem, it's like COVID. When you're not healthy, you get hit with it, you're in deep trouble. The Justice Department came down on this iconic company in Texas like they were running Hitler's experiments. Greg Abbott was being smeared on the show because when they finally opened their doors back up at the governor's office, he had gallons of BlueBell because, of course, it's a culture for people who don't understand this in Texas. It's a culture. It's a brand. It's a thing. BlueBell is a thing in Texas. And they're excoriating Governor Abbott for having these gallons. And I'm thinking to myself, the Justice Department wants jail time for this guy. When at the most you can tie is 3 deaths to him, and no death is good. Obviously, he screwed up, and even with the people being sick, they should never have been subjected to that or exposed to contaminated ice cream. And they, it's ironic. The hospital didn't realize it. Here you have people who are sick. What do you do for people when they're sick to make them feel better? You make them ice cream or a milkshake, right? Out of the ice cream. And because it's Texas, one was in Tarrant County, for crying out loud. Fort Worth area. And because it's Texas, it's BlueBell. And I'm thinking, tragic as this is, Big Pharma, like Pfizer and Purdue Pharma, could literally kill millions of people as a result of their products, and they don't do shit. A U.S. attorney doesn't lift a damn finger. And you may say, Rich, well, Purdue Pharma was sued into an oblivion. Right, by people in Ohio. Federal government didn't lift a finger to go after Purdue Pharma. Didn't lift a finger to go after the doctors who were bought by Purdue Pharma to tell the people of the country that their product was safe when it was not safe. Hollowing out entire communities, entire generations of workers. Have you been to West Virginia lately? But by all means, focus your fire on BlueBell ice cream. And now Remington. Go get them. It's ridiculous. It's not even comparable. One is a serious threat to society. The other one's basically on the periphery. All right. Let me take a break. When we come back, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. I mean, folks, as far as numbers go, it's not close. It's not close at all. Not even remotely close. Big Pharma is way more dangerous than big guns. There isn't even a big gun or big firearm. The NRA is not nearly as powerful as it used to be. Not nearly as influential in the bipartisan days when Democrats like Bernie Sanders, by the way, had an A rating from the NRA. It's not hard to go back and find a clip of Bernie Sanders saying that gun ownership in Vermont is a culture. It's by which the Second Amendment is how we protect the rest of the 9. It's not hard to find Harry Reid saying it in the 1990s. But those days are over. And the NRA as a power on K Street, their power has greatly diminished. Hell, you have states like New York trying to throw them out. They're not even allowed. They're trying to criminalize contributions to them. The Field and Stream lobby is not what it used to be. It's kind of a bit of a joke, don't you think? Pfizer hired almost 100 lobbyists since the start of the pandemic. They are by far, well, I don't know, because next to some financial lobbyists, I think it may be close, but Pfizer is by far the number one in big pharma. Nobody else comes close to them as far as lobbying and influence on K Street, but they are, if not the biggest, among the biggest rent seekers in Washington, D.C. right now. As Dr. Malone likes to say, and he's correct in saying it, they own Capitol Hill. They own it. The NRA doesn't own anything. They own a small, tiny position in one party. Because the truth is that party that's supposed to be favorable to them anyway, most of the time they would backstab the NRA if they got the chance and felt politically covered by it. I would like to even say half of that party backs the Second Amendment and understands it and is unequivocal. And it says, look, the Second Amendment's not up for debate. It's a Bill of Rights, which is the correct response. That's what? 5% of the Republican Party? 10%? Let's be real. John Duarte gets elected, and 24 hours later, the guy's on a radio show saying the Second Amendment's up for debate. He represents the Kevin McCarthy wing of the party. So give me a break. Who's the speaker again? That's right. Kevin McCarthy. I don't think he's stupid enough to bring up something like that now, but Peter Meyer, the only thing that really is there is the vote. Peter Meyer was defeated by John Gibbs in the Republican nomination for Michigan 3. That's true. Michigan 8 or 3? 8, excuse me. I'm having a brain fart here. One of the votes that really got him was the gun vote. In fact, the impeachment vote was already, it hurt him, but there were some people who still thought, you know what, I can respect his independence and his, talk about a household name. He's a household name with the store out there, his family chain. So, maybe he would have been harder to beat. The gun vote, we polled during that gun vote, and that was like the straw that broke the camel's back for many of the other voters. Yep. Yeah, Robert Kennedy Jr. is in fact running for president. And we'll be talking more about that when we come back and, when we do our last segment on presidential polls. We'll take a look at the results of the social polls that we have up right now, and then we'll discuss it. What's the pros and cons of doing some of these states, et cetera, et cetera. But first, let's take a real quick break. All right, we're going to have a little bit of a word here from our sponsor. And when we come back, we're going to talk about Ron DeSantis. Our donors ditching Ron DeSantis as his poll numbers take a dive. Are lawmakers dissing Ron DeSantis as Trump steals all his thunder with his trip to D.C.? We're going to talk about it all together. Whether or not media is making too much out of a few things, and we're also going to tell you how to read between the lines. All right, when a donor says something, what they really mean. All right, let's take a real quick break. We'll be back from this word from our sponsor, which is me. Look, national security experts are warning our aging power grid is more vulnerable than ever. January marked the third time a power station in North Carolina was damaged by gunfire. Authorities are saying the attack, and recently, raises a new level of threat, unquote. Authorities are now checking our grid for vulnerabilities, and they've identified 9 key substations. If these substations are attacked, power could be knocked out from coast to coast for up to 18 months. Imagine a blackout lasting not days, but weeks or months. Your life would be frozen in time right at the moment the power failed. Lights all over the country would go out, throwing people into total darkness. Bet you'll wish you protected the Second Amendment then. That's why having your own solar power is more important than ever. With the Patriot Power Generator, you get a solar generator that doesn't install into your house because it's portable. You can take it with you, even use it inside, but it's powerful enough for your phones, your medical devices, even your refrigerator. And right now, you can go to 4patriots.com, use the promo code TPP10, and get 10% off your first purchase on anything in the store, including the Patriot Power Generator. You'll also get the famous guarantee for an entire year after your order, plus free shipping on orders over $97. And a portion of every sale is donated to charities who support our veterans and their families. So just go to 4patriots.com, use the promo code TPP10 to get 10% off. Again, one more time. That's 4patriots.com. Use the code TPP10 to get yours today. And listen, tell you the Patriot Power Generator, I got a couple of pictures. That's really cool. Super cool. Even if you have a generator outside, right? Maybe it's natural gas or whatever it is. The difference here is that it's portable. You could bring it indoors and it's solar powered. So we like to have a backup of our backup. And that's what we get with the Patriot Power Generator. If you go with the 3-month survival kit, use your TPP10 code on something that's, make it worth the savings, right? If you get the 3-month Patriot Survival Kit, all right, with the food, and they're going to give you all these different items, see what you get as a free gift along with them first before you buy anything that you think is an accessory. Although you never know, you may get a solar water purifier or something. You may get the Patriot stove. All right, every one of those free gifts in that kit is worth something. It's useful, right? So don't waste your discount on something like that, which you'd end up with a smaller item and end up with 2 of them later in the future. All right, so definitely either use it on the Patriot Power Generator or the 3-month survival kit. Both are just fantastic. Love them. They're great products. Great products. All right, let me give you, before we move on, I want you to, when you get a chance, if you're interested, I'll send it to YouTube first. Here is the link that we were discussing, just preventable overdose deaths. All right, locals coming your way. All right, preventable overdose deaths. Rumble coming your way. Getter coming your way. All right, so there's the link for that, and I can get rid of that. Here is the Pew Research link. All right, and this is pretty interesting. If you continue to read, there's a lot of good stuff. YouTube coming your way. Locals, and just the order in which I see it. All right, coming your way. Check it out, and you'll see. Again, pay attention to the nuances of the data. We're not discussing here the difference between gun violence with a handgun. We didn't break those statistics down, even though we know for certain most of these deaths are done with handguns. They are not the result of people running around with AR-15s, folks. The AR-15, when handled properly, is nothing more than a rifle that is semi-automatic, like most non-pistol handguns. All right, so I'm non-hammer. I'm not a fan of the old schools. That's not true. It depends what it's for. But I'm very much a Glock guy, not a revolver guy. And I'm sorry, I haven't slept in like 36 hours. Revolver is the word I'm looking for. Although some of them are really cool, it just really depends what it is. All right, but again, check it out. And also remember, when you're looking at that preventable overdose deaths, that is simply one side of the coin, which I don't even think is the more relevant side of the coin. The real relevant side of the coin, when thinking about this debate, is the stuff that they are allowed to push on us that never was safe. And then 10 years later, you find out it's a major disaster. If 10 years from now, we find out I don't want to speculate, but something horrific. How many million people have died from Fauci juice, right? Pfizer won't pay a dime. Nobody will go to jail, right? Meanwhile, they're trying to throw the head of Remington in the jail cell, right? Or any other. And actually, Remington is not even a choice weapon for these people that are nutcases go out there. But you know what I mean. You get my point. All right. Time to get a little uncomfortable for some people. All right. It can't be ignored. We've got to discuss this. Where is it? Should I just bring up the image? First, we're going to take a look at two things. I'm not going to get too much into some of the other stuff. I want to talk about something that David found in Financial Times. All right. The article's in the Financial Times, and it says the following. All right. And actually, I'll just show Twitter. Let me stop that. Put this in here. Let's just go to Twitter. It's easier for me just to show it on Twitter. I was going to get the article up, but he screenshotted it. And I believe this was either Financial Times or Politico, I believe. Anyway, time out. Let me get some water. I'll read it out loud, but you can check it out. Indeed, the Financial Times, by the way. I want you to understand this. I want you to read this in the context of everything that I have told you, everything that I told you when I was being attacked for telling you, and how it all came true. I even told you about the meeting, the luncheon gathering that nobody was supposed to hear about, later appeared on NBC News, where a certain donor couple told him, I think you need to rethink this presidential run. We're not giving you any more money because you're going to get killed. And because we care about you and think you have a bright future, we're very concerned that you're going to be the next Ted Cruz, that this is career ending. If you lose, it's either ride or die, baby. Because if you lose, it's over for you. So here another article appeared. At that time, I told you that donors told DeSantis at that meeting, many of them told DeSantis surrogates and others, he's got to show us something in the polls. We're stopping. We're holding. And by the way, notice the word he used. We're holding our powder dry. The exact phrase I gave you was keeping our powder dry. Right? And pumping the brakes. Right? I'm telling you to remember these terms on purpose. So Republican donor Thomas Peterfy is halting plans to help finance the U.S. presidential bid of Florida Governor Ron DeSantis due to his, quote, extreme positions on social issues. I have put myself on hold, the billionaire told the Financial Times, because of his stance on abortion and book banning. Myself and a bunch of friends are holding our powder dry, unquote. This is a lie. They're all holding our powder dry because the polls got worse for him. Since many of them told him, you have to show us something, and it can't just be the public opinion strategy polls that you keep planning in Axiom and the Miami Herald. Nobody believes them. Honestly, RCP, I'm a little bit confused as to your decision to put those polls on your website. We all know they're push polls. We all know who Neil Newhouse is. He's Mitt Romney's pollster. He was a respected pollster in Republican establishment circles. That is true. But he literally developed the unskew the polls movement in 2012 when everyone from Mitt Romney's camp argued that the polls were fake. They're not right because it's a turnout model difference, among other things. And we're going to be right. Don't you worry. You will see. We'll be right. You'll be wrong. And the last laugh will be on you. Blah, 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 blah. Fast forward to election night. They're sitting there watching the results come in. And it looks like Paul Ryan shit in his pants. And Mitt Romney just smelled it and realized it, and didn't want to say anything. And they're all uncomfortable in the room. Mitt Romney's literally getting ready to cry. Literally. They believe Neil. They wholly believe that he was right and that they were going to win that election. They thought Florida was in the bag, and that's it. These are the people who are now behind the polls that you keep seeing every couple of weeks. They were just out the other day making their rounds, showing DeSantis doing better than Trump in Pennsylvania and other key battleground states, and DeSantis beating Trump or very close in some of the head-to-head primary polling. Folks, one pollster who has been here before is not right when everyone else is wrong. Because unlike 2012, it's not just that. It's not just them, public opinion strategies, against the public opinion field like university polling and private firms that conduct polling on behalf of big media outlets. It's not that anymore. It's them plus all of the new independent pollsters who are out now. Victory polling had DeSantis leading in Florida for most of the time they've been polling. Now they have him getting his ass kicked in his own home state. Obviously, Emerson was the first to show it. They had DeSantis leading at one point, and then they had Trump +3. Now they have Trump plus like what? There was just a new round out. It's an even bigger lead. Yet they keep floating these BS polls, and the truth is the donors aren't buying it. The Ulans, they're not buying it. Pedophile over here, he's not buying it. He all of a sudden did not have some epiphany on Ron DeSantis' stance on abortion and book banning, quote, book banning. This has been who Ron DeSantis has been as a governor for a while now. This is what a mega donor will do to you when you become a loser. This is why you can never take money from these people and still remain true to yourself. This is who they are. They will discard you in a second. They have no core. They have no principles. They have nothing but their money and their misery and their delusions of using that money for power. When you take money from people like this, you sell yourself to the devil. They expect something. Some of the most ridiculous comments and punditry I have heard. Oh, it's a good thing Ron DeSantis has been taking money from these people. He'll be able to control them. Did you fall off the turnip truck? They control you. You don't control them. There has been one candidate, one president, eventually you got to that office, who stood up to the donor class after taking money from them. See, Trump, he didn't have to, because he basically said, sure, I don't need your money. You want to give it to me? That's fine, but don't expect anything. And he had the power to do that because he got there without them. He didn't need them. But Richard Nixon wasn't that lucky. Richard Nixon was very much raised poor, was always belittled by the Ivy League institutions Ron DeSantis attended, mocked. They looked down their nose at him. So when he got to the epicenter of the height of his power, he told them to stuff it. The EPA was a huge deal. He thought the smog in U.S. cities was just too bad. And somebody had to do something about legitimate environmental concerns. Richard Nixon, despite the warnings from the donors, Richard Nixon was responsible for the EPA. What happened to Richard Nixon when he crossed his donors? They fed him to the wolves. They stepped aside and they sound like Mr. Pedophile over here. You know what? Nixon's too radical. He's out of step. I can't in good conscience keep, supporting a guy who may have had something to do with the cover-up at Watergate. Are you kidding me? These people did not get rich by being nice. Hell, they didn't even get rich by playing by the rules. They will throw you out with the bathwater and the baby. Second you become a bad bet. Right. Thank you, Laura. The second you become a bad bet. If you think for a second this guy is telling the truth, then you are incredibly naive. But he's not alone, and that's the point. He is one, however, that went to the Financial Times to pretend like he's still the one with integrity. It's Ron DeSantis who lost his core and his friends. You know, I had no idea he was a book banner. I had no idea he was pro-life. Get out of here. You're so full of shit, dude. Financial Times. But do your job and push back on these people. What he said doesn't even make sense. He was handing Ron money hand over fist when he was going after school boards and, getting rid of what most of the country views to be inappropriate material in schools. This guy all of a sudden has a problem with Ron DeSantis's focus on what we expose our children to in the school system. Get out of here. All fairness to Ron. He's been doing that. How long, Laura? For 3 years now. This guy doesn't put bets on people he doesn't think is going to win. And that's it. That's the truth. And they'll come out with all of these excuses to make themselves look like not somebody who gave oodles and oodles of dollars to a loser or someone who appears to be a loser. No, they're not that dumb. They wouldn't be that stupid. So instead it has to be some kind of like moral decision. So full of crap. You're not fooling anybody. Or at least you're not fooling anybody who watches this show. Liar. Did you not a couple of weeks ago say you got to show me in the polls? You got to show me something in the polls? And not Karl Rove's friends who won't even release their crosstabs. I need public polls. I need Emerson to turn around. I need Big Data Poll to turn around. I need Quinnipiac to turn around. I need YouGov to turn around. I need Morning Consult to turn around. I need Victory Polling to turn around. I need CNN, Fox News, blah, 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 down the damn line. Every single poll except for Neil Newhouse's firm, Mitt Romney's friends, who, by the way, you got to love how these reporters do. The polls were funded by some group supporting DeSantis who isn't tied to Ron DeSantis. Like, what? So the super PAC, who is basically going to be funding his presidential campaign, but because he's not declared yet, it's technically not tied to him yet. Get out of here. And South Carolina is not going to be 80% educated. Jeez. And by the way, for people who don't know what I'm talking about, do you remember Karl Rove melting down on election night in 2012 on Megyn Kelly over the decision to call Ohio for Barack Obama? We need to find that clip. Why? Because that's Karl Rove's friend and friends all surrounding Ron DeSantis now. They're doing the same thing they did during 2012. And Karl Rove really believed it. I don't think he believes it now. I think they're full of crap, and they know they're full of crap, and they're using polls in the worst possible way that no pollster should ethically agree to, yet they're doing it. Shame on you. But back then, he believed it. He really believed that the suburbs of Franklin County were going to turn the state for Mitt Romney. And then they came in and I guess not. But he wigged out. Megyn Kelly had to get up and walk to the decision desk. And they had to explain why Karl Rove and his whiteboard is not living on planet Earth. Anyway, moving on to the next article here. And then we'll talk about some of the more recent polls. This now in the Politico playbook. And actually, I'm not going to show the image. Let's look at the whole article from Politico. For those who don't know, the playbook is usually this insider little letter kind of thing. It's an article, but it goes out as a letter if you subscribe to it. Two things. One, DeSantis' trip to Washington, D.C. was supposed to be his time to shine. He was supposed to rack up a bunch of endorsements. He got the endorsements we all knew about, but he got no big zingers. And Trump basically trolled him from 1,000 miles away and got more endorsements from 1,000 miles away out of the people that Ron DeSantis was lobbying than Ron DeSantis got being right there in front of their face. I know I get people laughing in the other room. It was a very tough day for the Florida governor, but it was an event that capped off what has been a very tough couple of weeks. Thank you. Hold on. Before we even move to that, hold on. Let's stay relevant. Hold on one second. Bear with me, folks. Bear with me. This has to be showed. Flashback.
But I've got to tell you, the Romney camp has real doubts about the call that's been made by us and I guess other networks about Ohio. They do not believe that Ohio is in the Obama camp. I just got an email from a top Romney person. I said, do you agree with our call? He said, not really. You went through this in 2000. You almost went through it in 2004. Do you believe that Ohio has been settled?
No, I don't.
So you're not saying that Obama isn't going to win, but you're just saying he hasn't won it yet.
I think this is premature. We got a quarter of the vote.
I understand what Carl's saying, but if you look at some of these counties.
Look at the margins, guys. Look at the margins. Because as Laura remembers full good and well, that night, we were working on Florida, but I heard about the kerfuffle over Ohio. And I said, not only did Mitt Romney lose the state of Ohio, but this margin will widen for Obama. And I didn't even turn another second of my attention to it. I was working on Florida, and I was trying to find out, where the votes were coming, what was outstanding. And Florida wasn't decided for a couple of days, even when the election was over. We were all still trying to figure out Florida. But it took me all of a minute and a half to go over Ohio when there was about 31% of the vote in. And then I said, not only did Mitt Romney lose the state of Ohio, that margin will grow. Keep an eye on the margin as they're debating.
Counties that are still left out there, there are votes, a lot of votes left for Obama.
I don't know what the outcome is going to be, but we got to be careful about calling things when we have like 991 votes separating the two candidates and a quarter of the vote yet to count.
Well, folks.
991 votes? There's 30,000 votes separating the candidates right now. As he says that. 991 votes?
Thanks.
So maybe not so fast.
Thanks a lot. Thank you. It's great to have you guys here.
That's awkward.
Okay, so here's what we're going to do.
We're going to try
Karl
to
Rove said that we should figure out what the deal is.
try to get to the bottom of this.
Here she goes. This was totally unnecessary.
Out the door.
Megyn
They
Kelly
used to keep
do
him
this.
right here with us in the studio. And then for some reason, whoa, careful. Then for some reason, they moved him down the hall. We were too close. We were thinking this wouldn't be necessary, but
Totally unnecessary.
as it turns out. So we'll do a little interrogation and see if they stand by their call, notwithstanding the doubts that Karl Rove has attempted to place. Keep coming. Here we go. You tell me whether you stand by your call on Ohio, given the doubts Karl Rove just raised.
We're actually quite comfortable with the call in Ohio. Basically, right now, there's too much Obama vote that's outstanding there that we know is going to come in, that is going to be Obama. And while, yes, there are a number of counties out there that will be Romney, the largest thing that's outstanding right now is the Cleveland area. It's Cuyahoga. This is Democratic territory, and we're quite comfortable with the idea that Obama will carry Ohio.
Look, we've had one instance where something was prematurely called.
You know it well.
They said this is not going to be another one of those.
Maybe not. Seems to me to be a very early call with 991 votes separating
I
the
went
two
back there,
candidates.
talked to Arnon Mishkin, Chris Direwalt, Michael Barone's back there. They're
And
all
they're
looking at the
they're
same.
very smart guys. They're very smart guys. I'm just saying that in terms of public perception, it looks a little odd for us to be making a call with
But you know how the
991
science.
votes.
They didn't care about that with Arizona, though. Remember that? They didn't care about calling Arizona way too early when what was really outstanding was Trump vote. That was outstanding, and Biden's lead, everybody knew, was not going to hold up as Trump vote came in, and how Arizona counts their votes, which is ridiculous, but how they do, everybody knew that we had 4 to 5 days of late arriving mail-in vote and late counted mail-in vote that was in red areas in Pinal County and in Maricopa County that was going to continue to come in for Trump and close that margin. He didn't give a damn about that. Here he cares about Mitt Romney, of course, and he did because of they bet the farm on this pollster who is putting out these push polls for DeSantis right now. They bet the farm on this firm's analysis done by Neil Newhouse that everybody else's polling was wrong because they were assuming about turnout that this would be a more partisan electorate and that it would favor Barack Obama, when in truth, most people were somewhere in the middle, folks. It would be a partisan electorate like it is most of the time for an incumbent president, but it would not be on par with 08. However, they thought that Republicans were going to have a turnout advantage in places like this. And not only that, but that Mitt Romney was doing so well with independents, it would be enough to overcome that turnout advantage, even if Democrats had one that was a small one, D+1 to D+3. In the end, I remember correctly, it was D+5, and it was not a big advantage with independents at all. At all.
Works. They know the counties and they know the expected outcome, the
And look,
makeup of the remaining electorate.
All right, so there you have it, and that was one of the least fine moments for Karl Rove. But again, that was because they bet the farm on that, and now that we're back with these guys. They're back, and there's something that has to be said about this. I said this on Charlie Kirk's show the other day. The only ones who have nothing to lose are these consultants who are pushing Ron DeSantis to run for president, who have filled his head with the idea that if he gets him one-on-one with these indictments, he can beat him. The truth is, the head-to-head between Trump and DeSantis never led. Never. And now the margin is so big, you're headed for a career-ending defeat in your own home state. This idea he hasn't announced yet, it bears repeating it as well. So what I'm trying to tell you is, though, really quick before I move on, the consultants who have been expelled from Trump world have nothing to lose. They don't get hired by the candidates that are aligned by Trump. These influencers, too, who have basically turned their back on the former president, and they're well capable of, it's their decision to do it. These are the people who are pushing the person who does have something to lose. If you truly cared about Ron DeSantis' future, then you would put that before your own paycheck, before your own relevance. And that's what's happening to Governor DeSantis right now. And he's the one who will pay the heaviest price you can pay in politics. If he loses to Trump, he will be removed from consideration in the future for presidency, period. It will be over for him. Right now, like I said, it's not just this pollster, but there's another pollster in Florida who has been in the game a long time. Him and I talk quite a bit. He's tracking this race, has been since the midterms ended. Trump has not only taken a lead in Florida, he's taken a big lead in Florida. I don't see what's going to happen from now until then, because we're in such an ahistorical event here, an ahistorical situation. We have never had, for those who keep saying, well, the early primary winners don't always go on to win. Joe Biden did. What are you talking about? It's not a rule of thumb, although in the past it has been typically the case. This isn't a typical case. Here we have a former president who is still largely beloved by the party. I just don't see it. And that argument about head-to-head, They had to have assumed, even when we had Trump at 43, his weakest position in our national polling, they had to assume that every single non-Trump 57% vote was going to all move over to Ron DeSantis when everybody else got out. But that's not true, because even Nikki Haley's vote, when you ask who's your second choice, a good percentage of them say Trump. Mike Pence, who's your second choice? Trump. Vivek now, who's gaining some traction. Who's your second choice? It's almost all Trump. So is this like ridiculous expectation that they were going to deny him, even at his weakest point, folks, from a majority? 43, 7 points shy of a majority, even at his weakest point. They had this ridiculous expectation in their argument, in their pitch to donors, that once we get it head to head, we're going to deny him 6, 7, 8 points. Every single one is going to go to Ron. I mean, Laura, it's like that's how you ended up where you are. I hate to be honest with people. By making horrible takes like that have no chance to come to fruition. The only thing that's happening here is the party is being divided. While Democrats are continuing to build their vote by mail operation, knowing they have an incredibly, historically weak incumbent president, the weakest ever in modern politics, the weakest ever, that if they make this a ballot harvesting election, a real contest of gathering ballots, then they can do for Joe Biden what they did for John Fetterman. They'll get the vote in if they get in front of the Democratic voter. And instead of Republicans doing that because they're way behind, donors are playing games like this, dividing the party. Whomever the Republican nominee is, I said on the Talk of the Town, Eastern North Carolina, baby. I said it this morning. Whoever the nominee ends up being has an enormous task ahead of them. Trump isn't a natural vote, a get out the vote candidate, but even he will still need infrastructure to get out more of that vote, to go and harvest the ballots, get them and bring them in before Democrats can do it. Because I'll tell you, every vote that you leave on the table, Democrats are going to go get, and they're going to fill it out one way or the other. But instead, this is what we're dealing with. Donors like that. Again, many of them expelled from Trump world who have absolutely nothing to lose. So they absolutely have no problem putting themselves ahead of their party, their country, their children's future. They don't give a damn. This is the most egomaniac class of society you will ever meet. Anyway, so I'll tell you what, Stubby is a big deal. And even I knew a couple of these things were coming. I wanted to talk about this Monday. Byron Donalds was devastating. Let's go back up. Basically, all but one, DeSantis has lost his entire state delegation to Donald Trump. All right, and I'm going to read the whole thing here. It was supposed to be Ron DeSantis' big day on Capitol Hill. Yet, Donald Trump managed to overshadow him from almost 1,000 miles away. In the 24 hours leading up to the Florida governor's much-anticipated meeting with GOP lawmakers, two members from his own state, Representatives John Rutherford and Greg Steube, endorsed Trump. A third Floridian, Representative Brian Mast, which was the biggest surprise, right, Laura? I was like, oh my God, when we found this out. Who was once considered close with DeSantis. He wasn't once considered close. He's considered close. Or the one, relatively speaking, I guess. Told CNN that he'll soon follow suit. This was devastating. We thought Mast was going to DeSantis. This is devastating to Ron DeSantis because you can't just be embarrassed like this in your own delegation. And a few hours later, in a stone cold act of political brutality, Representative Lance Gooden, Republican from Texas, walked out of the DeSantis meeting and declared his support for Trump. It's a killer, said one positively giddy Trump confidant who was on the phone with Playbook when news of Gooden's surprise endorsement broke. and as somebody who knows a couple of people from this, I think I know who said that, because that is so characteristic of this person. I'm pretty sure I know who said that. To be fair, DeSantis notched a couple small victories yesterday. Freshman Representative Laurel Lee, his former Secretary of State, endorsed him, and his Capitol Hill event, where he spoke about his state's policy agenda, decried the radical Biden administration, and offered to help expand the House majority without once mentioning Trump, drew at least 3 dozen lawmakers. So at least 36 lawmakers. From everything that we had been hearing from lawmakers across the country, California is another one. California Republicans are not base Republicans. I don't even know why they're Republican, many of them. And that includes Kevin McCarthy's handpicked girl, his successor. These are Trump haters. They can't stand Donald Trump. Trump gave at least 2 of them their endorsement when they needed it, and they're going to stab him in the back. All right. I don't know if the mood has changed since then, but speaking with donors who spoke to one of them, who's been in the House for a while, had a primary challenger, by the way, because this person is an incumbent, had a primary challenger who was making a go of it with the blessing of Kevin McCarthy, who was supposed to be endorsing this incumbent. He was playing both sides of the fence, Kevin, as usual. This person said, was desperately needing Trump's endorsement. He could have went down in a surprise defeat. Absolutely. Because his challenger was really motivating some grassroots people on the ground, and they were taking some real hard, even though I would say nasty shots at him. Actually quite reminiscent of DeSantis supporters on Twitter right now. No, it's true, Laura, right? Doesn't it recognize? I mean, can we be real? To be fair, DeSantis notched those small victories, but at the end of the day, Trump had picked up more endorsements from Florida than DeSantis could muster with his boots on the ground in Washington. Look, I mean, that is devastating and embarrassing. But what's more embarrassing is Florida itself. The loss of Greg is a disaster. And what's even more disastrous about it, he's willing to basically tell everybody why he did it. Not only did lawmakers leave the DeSantis event without delivering their backing, our colleagues Sarah Ferris, Ali Mutnick, and Burgess Everett report, but several, quote, tried to downplay their attendance, saying they went because the governor was a former colleague and they wanted to say hello. Holy shit. I'm sorry, Laura, but I'm sorry. She hates it when I curse, but and she's right, but holy moly. This is a dejection of the highest order. Listen, folks, let me explain to you that most people in Washington, D.C., including in the House, that are Republican, hate Donald Trump. They see the handwriting on the wall. And he couldn't even pick them off with DeSantis 10 feet in front of him. Now, Stube is a different story. Check this out. And by the way, this sounds like Mitt Romney, doesn't it? His tenure at this place. So we got Laurel Lee. She's his former Secretary of State. She had no choice but to endorse him. He helped her. Apparently, she's giving him the benefit that he didn't even give Trump, which is that you get me elected, I don't stab you in the back. Not only did lawmakers not do it, but they were making up excuses. Inside the ambush, we made some calls to Trump World last night to figure out just how much of this was coordinated. Gooden's dramatic gesture, we're told, came as a surprise to the former president's brain trust. But much of the rest was quickly and carefully orchestrated over the past few days. It began over the weekend when Trump traveled to Nashville for the RNC donor retreat and attended a meeting arranged by Senator Bill Haggerty, Republican from Tennessee, with most of the state's GOP congressional delegation. Trump and his team, and by the way, how many people were mocking him making that trip? Go back on Twitter. Go look at the DeSantis world, the influencers, and they were trying to make him out to be like the establishment RNC hack. he knew damn well what they were planning in DC, which was essentially a hostile takeover situation. But he went, shored up stuff, and made sure it didn't happen. And he outmaneuvered and played the hell out of DeSantis. There's no other way to go with this. There's no other way to frame it. He made them look like amateurs. And they're saying it was a surprise what happened with Gooden. And I bet it was. But the rest of it was not. But it just goes to show you, too, how much of an outmaneuver it was and how dominant Trump's hand is in the polls, how strong of a favorite he is. Even though, yes, early leaders don't always go on. That's true. That's a stupid, weak argument. He is way ahead in the polling right now. Even when he was the weakest in the polling, he was still in such a strong position demographically. As it goes to these demographics, we keep going over. If you want to beat Trump, you have to mathematically, you cannot do it without breaking into that working class coalition. 30 plus points is not breaking into it. I'm talking about single digit leads to low to mid-teen double-digit leads. That's where you would have to safely bring him in order not to lose. It's not mathematically possible to do it any other way. There aren't enough Republicans voting in primaries, typically. And I got a big shock to everybody here. This Republican nomination is going to be more non-white than it has ever been. Mark my words now. Trump has a secret weapon. It's the new non-white Republican in urban areas. I'm not the only one who sees it. Look at everybody's crosstabs, folks. And if they miss them and there's an NA next to other race or black or Hispanic, that means they didn't poll enough of them to give a significant result. We do. They're gonna vote. So if you want to counter that, if you want to make sure you have enough after maybe splitting certain educated, some college associate degree, let's say you split that with Trump, but then you lose the working class by like 15. You could do it if you really thrash them with postgrads, win pretty sizably with college educated. But then out of nowhere comes this non-white voter you weren't even shooting for. You weren't even appealing. You never even saw them coming. And they run up the margin, boy, in urban areas. Massachusetts suddenly isn't a white-only electorate. Holy crap, where'd all these people come from in Nevada? Oh my God. Too late. Game, set, match. It's over. So when he's winning some of these groups, forget breaking below 30. Some of them are like plus 50s, 40s and 50s. Good luck. And these people see the handwriting on the wall. They were ready. Laura, were many of these people not ready to bail on Trump only a few months ago? They were ready to peel out. Can you speak into the thing or you can't? Yeah, that it was just like, you know what? It was time to move on. It's time to move on from Trump.
He was more, what is it? He was more gentle. And he wasn't as...
Yes, more refined. More refined.
That's the word. Thank you.
Right. He wasn't as crass and he wasn't as rough around the edges as Trump. He was the refined version of MAGA. It's time to move on to the refined version of MAGA. And in truth, honestly, when you meet DeSantis in person, he's awkward. He's not refined. He's really not.
Yeah.
In personal settings, he comes across as aloof. Is the nicest way I can say it. And Grandma always said, Richard, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say it at all. So aloof is where I'm going to end.
All I got to say is I rather the diamond that's stuck in the lava, rough around the edges, that gives me
what you paid for?
More money for my buck, even though it's not shiny and polished and it looks great. But you know what's underneath? A 20-carat diamond. Instead of the 3-carat diamond that you're showing me, that's all polished and shiny.
Ooh, that's a great analogy. But the truth, and maybe that's why, Laura, maybe you just said why he's soaring with women right now. I'm serious. Maybe you just put it. Maybe you put it better than anybody could have put it. But in truth, Laura, he's that 3 carat is not that shiny. That's the truth. So the more, that's another thing, by the way. Everything we've seen from DeSantis, everyone keeps saying, wait until he announces. Wait till announcements result in temporary bumps, and then the candidate is vetted. The spotlight goes on them, and they either rise to the occasion or they fall. And everything so far that we have seen from Team DeSantis, the flip-flopping on Ukraine, the absolute bungling of the indictment, the mishandling of the indictment, trade, Vladimir Putin's a war criminal, he needs to be stopped. Then, oh no, it's just a border dispute. This is Scott Walker all over again, because this is what happens when you do what Ron DeSantis is doing and what Scott Walker did and so many others have done. This is what happens when you are consultant driven.
And the problem is now everybody's taking that 3 carat diamond and putting it under a microscope. And that's
right.
when you see the flaws.
That's right. It's exactly right. I mean, I got to be honest. That what are the odds where Robert, he brought the receipts. He was like, for the show today, permit me to do a little bit of a deep dive into DeSantis' background, and it's like, and I was like, go for it. Do what you got to do. He brought the receipts. There's his signature right next to Adam Kinzinger pushing then Secretary of State John Kerry for a coup. I mean, that was the coup letter. That's the infamous coup letter. I mean, that's not, it doesn't matter what my opinion is. I'm telling you what voters tell us. They are not going to deal with a lab created diamond. They had the real thing. And Trump, whether you like him or love him, hate him or dislike him, whatever, he set a standard for Republican voters. And now that they've had the real thing, they're not going to settle for a cubic zirconia. It's it. And that got Trump people thinking. Trump and his team were pleasantly surprised to learn the delegation was ready and eager to endorse him, and they did. And there's the link. I mean, guys, I put it on locals. I'm like, look, when you lose your own delegation, that got Trump's people thinking. While he'd already received the endorsements of several prominent Florida Republicans, Trump's team wondered if others in the delegation might follow suit, just as DeSantis traveled to Capitol Hill. So on Sunday night, Trump officials sent emails to Sunshine State members asking if they'd be willing to play ball. Heck yes, I'd love to endorse him, one lawmaker replied. Beyond Mast, Rutherford, and Stubbe, other members are expected to back Trump in the coming days, we're told. Holy crap. Anna Paula Luna, who, by the way, Trump knew could win that race when the rest of them wouldn't even give her the time of day in 2020. I remember I was like, this woman can win that district. They didn't want to give her any help, and she barely lost it. So on Sunday night, Trump officials sent these emails, right? The amazing part of it is how easy it was. One person close to Trump said, well, that's what happens when you're ahead by 30-something points. Noting his team was shocked, for example, that Florida Representative Byron Donalds, I was a little bit shocked about Donalds too. I was. Why? Because while I think he's MAGA. I do. I thought that he would be part of that newer, different, he was one of the ones who asked for conditions for McCarthy, but he wasn't vehemently opposed to McCarthy. And that's who's waging this little war against Trump and team. It's like Paul Ryan, and people who surround McCarthy. That's who's doing it. That's who's whispering the ears of the California delegation, who Trump endorsed many of these people. So I just thought, the crowd he hangs around with, he may be, and because he's from Florida, that maybe he's right for picking off, but for DeSantis to pick off, but no way. Anyway, Donalds, who had introduced DeSantis and his family at the governor's election night victory party, see what I mean, was all in when they called him up recently, when Trump's world called him up. The step back, it's a troubling sign for DeSantis if he can't convince more Republican lawmakers who know better than most how Trump can be a general election liability. That's a bullshit statement, all right? It's what they believe. It's not true. And actually, speaking of the interview with Talk of the Town this morning, I discussed that argument. He asked me point blank, what about the argument from DeSantis' world that Trump isn't electable? I destroyed it. I destroyed it in like 3 minutes. It certainly doesn't bode well for his appeal to the common GOP voter, who probably isn't as concerned about electability, the core of DeSantis's pitch. That pitch only works for donors and for rhinos in the House. If you poll and ask Republicans who is more electable, who's most likely to beat Biden, they will tell you that no other candidate except for Donald Trump by about a 65-35 margin. No other candidate can beat Joe Biden. So like 2016, when the polls, the politicians, and the donors, the mega donors were all saying, right, that Trump is the only one who couldn't beat Hillary. The Republican voter didn't buy that. And they said Rubio can't beat her, Jeb can't beat her, Cruz can't beat her. Nobody but Trump can beat Hillary Clinton. It's not going to work this time either. We already asked this. Even when he wasn't doing well, by the way. He was doing well, but he wasn't doing it as well as he's doing now. They still said, nope, Trump is the best chance to beat him. And by the way, if you're going to make a comparison, there is nobody better to make a comparison than Trump. He has the I told you so pitch. I'm telling you not my own opinion. I'm telling you how voters work. And like I said on that interview this morning, I'm just going to repeat it here. The shine is off Joe Biden. In 2020, you had COVID, changing all the rules of elections to be able to expand vote by mail, to reduce the verification procedures, to verify whether vote by mail is done correctly and the elections were prosecuted legit, whatever you want to call it, credibly. That's not in play this time, but that's not it. When we asked people whether they liked Joe Biden, they had a favorable image of Joe Biden. Unlike Hillary Clinton, they did. The shine is off Joe Biden now. Donald Trump does not have to beat some arbitrary standard that we are setting for him or the DeSantis supporters are setting for him. He's only got to beat the standard that is Joe Biden. And the shine is off Joe Biden now. When we polled several of these battleground states, who's more likely to start a foreign war, a new foreign conflict? Unbelievable. Minnesota, Michigan, very close in Pennsylvania, but in Minnesota, Michigan, New Hampshire, they all said Donald Trump was more likely. Now we have a new war that we're slow walking ourselves into World War III over. Taiwan may be gone by the time the election happens. The Abraham Accords have basically been decimated. There is so much for Trump to say here that no other candidate can say. And when you flip and you flop and you flip and you flop like Ron DeSantis did, winning those non-intervention voters in Minnesota, in New Hampshire, in Michigan, in Pennsylvania, in Wisconsin, in Iowa, by the way, if you think Iowa is just going to stay red because what? Republicans are cool or something? You're nuts. It will not. Ohio will go back to being razor thin. You think I'm kidding? But the snub from GOP lawmakers in his home state is particularly striking. And it's playing into the narrative that DeSantis is too aloof and unattentive. And I use that word because it was the nicest thing I could do. And inattentive to the interpersonal niceties of big league politics. And again, I said this to Charlie Kirk the other day, that people are focusing so much on the indictment, but about why the polls have changed the way they have. And believe me, this is radical. He's doing better now than he's ever done. All right. The reason I believe which started is that Trump, it's that Washington Post article we brought up, like it's been what, 6 weeks now, 8 weeks now ago, something like that. It's that article, how they were comparing Ron DeSantis in Iowa versus Trump in Ohio and Iowa and everywhere else Trump had gone. Trump is going back to the 2016 campaign where he is meeting people personally. He is very, very effective when he is in this kind of venue. He got too much hooked up on the big rallies. And while they absolutely have to be a tool in his arsenal, they cannot be the only tool. That's not what wins over a swing voter. It fires up the base, but it doesn't win over a swing voter. going into a McDonald's unannounced, handing out hats and patting people on the back and giving them hope, that wins swing voters. Showing up to an event for veterans healthcare in South Carolina, but by the way, one of them putting it on is a staunch liberal, and you sit there and you listen to them and you shake hands and you show you care, that wins voters. When you go and you see farmers who you knew as president and you going back and knowing they're having a tough time and you're shaking their hand and you're saying, don't worry, help is on the way. And that farmer was a swing. He was thinking about voting for DeSantis in the caucus. But now he's solid Trump again. That wins voters. When you show up in the Manchester Police Department and you just start shaking hands and patting them on the back and telling them, don't worry, I had your back before, I'll have it now. That wins swing voters. It doesn't win swing voters when you're aloof and unattentive. How badly so? Just ask Stubby, who told Playbook in a brief interview last night that DeSantis has never once reached out to him during his 5 years in Congress, nor replied to his multiple attempts to connect. Huh. He recalled a recent news conference dealing with damage from Hurricane Ian, where the governor's aides initially invited him to stand alongside DeSantis, only to tell him that he wouldn't be a part of the event when he showed up. Oh, yeah. You want to piss a lawmaker off? Do that. And I got to tell you something else. I can probably explain why it is they didn't have their act together during that event, because he didn't plan to be there. He planned to be in Texas with Paul Ryan's mega donors. Right? Pesky hurricane got in the way. This is before he was openly acknowledging that he, and anyone was openly acknowledging that he was going to run. In fact, if you walked up to him and shook his hand and shot the you-know-what with him, and you were just an average voter, he would tell you he felt that Trump was robbed in 2020 and that it was his right to redeem himself. And
Verbatim.
Meanwhile, he may have not realized he had to put this, he may have invited Stube and brought them over there, but things were out of whack because that press conference was put together hastily. Again, he had to cancel the trip to Texas that he really expected to do that day. But it would look like a PR disaster, and they would say, where is he going? And if he didn't cancel it, they would have said, where is he going in Texas? Who is he meeting with? And what's so important about this meeting that he's ignoring Hurricane Ian's damage? And then that would have blew it up for all of you to see with your own eyes and to hear with your own ears that I was, in fact, not lying to you. Remember, at this time, I'm still being called a liar. Right? Trump, on the other hand, was the first person, Stu, remember, calling him in the ICU to wish him well after he was injured in a January tree trimming accident. Yeah, apparently I don't. Yeah, I could look at it, but I know the basics of it. He was cutting the hedges or something in it. Let me see. Greg Stubbe spent Wednesday night in a Florida intensive care unit after suffering serious injuries in an approximately 25-foot fall. Oh, okay, that's right. He fell instead of getting cut. That's right. We fell from a ladder on his property. The incident occurred Wednesday at the Florida Republican's property in Sarasota while he was cutting tree limbs, according to his office. The injuries remain under assessment, his office added, but not viewed as life-threatening, quote, at this time. He's making progress and in good spirits, he had tweeted out at the time. But it was nevertheless a serious accident. Guys. Oh, sorry. Guys our age, you fall off a damn ladder like that 25 feet, you're in trouble. We're not young anymore, right, guys? Accident like that can cause you to be paralyzed for the rest of your damn life.
Mm-hmm.
To this day, I have not heard from Governor DeSantis, he said. This is a congressman from an area in Florida that you didn't do that well in your first time around. Not nearly as well as Trump. Did do well the second time around. And you didn't even call him when he fell off a 25-foot ladder? Things suddenly changed last week, Stubbe said. as Trump started rolling out his Florida congressional backers. For the first time ever, I hear from DeSantis's political person, he said, referring to aide Ryan Tyson, who reportedly contacted other Florida Republicans about their endorsements. And those were calls trying to get them to unendorse and come over. And it basically went a little something like this. Hey, Byron, I didn't know if, thanks for giving me a second. It's good talking to you. How's well? Your family well? Good. I just wanted to call you and tell you, I don't know if you endorsed because you weren't sure what we were doing, but I can assure you the governor is running. So with that in mind, we're wondering if you're willing to unendorse or at least remain neutral at this point, now that you've heard he is going to run. Nope. I'm all in. Thanks for calling, though. Have a good day. That's what those calls were. I kid you not. Maybe you were unclear. There's clearly reports out there, but you didn't hear it from one of us. And here I am to tell you, personally, I want to let you know that, yes, he's running. Okay, great. I wish him all the luck in the world. Would you be willing to unendorse the president, Trump, now that Nope. But thanks for calling. Tell the wife and kids I said hello. I mean, that's how this stuff goes, Laura, right?
Truth.
I remember this happening with the candidate that we beat in the primary and incumbent. He was like, I don't know. This is how it's done. I don't know if you endorse so-and-so because you weren't clear on whether or not I was going to run again, but I am running again. So that will be my primary challenger. And you've always been with me. So I just wanted you to hear it from me. I'm running. Great. Good luck with that. Click.
Not today.
I mean, you're not trying to make an enemy, but at the same time, you're like, yeah, I knew you were running. I endorsed anyway. All right, let's move on here. Back to it. Things suddenly changed last cycle, and then all of a sudden he starts to get it. For Stubby, the outreach was too little too late. And he continues to have sharp words for DeSantis, criticizing him for his robust political travel schedule amid a busy legislative session and just months after winning a new 4-year term. Floridians want him focused on Florida, he said, which is the job they elected him to do. Oh, God. And I got to tell you, there have been many gubernatorial candidates with aspirations for political office higher. Many of them who are seen and winning comfortably in their own states, who were seen as governors, great governors by their own people, but not as presidents. It takes something else. Scott Walker, Laura, amen. Bob McDonnell, who consequently won Virginia by the same margin that Ron DeSantis won Florida. Bob McDonnell won Fairfax County. All right, so what's he doing over there? What's my little munchkin doing? He's not feeling well? All right. So with that in mind, he would not be the first one to have voters like him, but like him as a governor. And I got to tell you, the polling in Sunshine State is really, really embarrassing. And I've heard this before. Oh, don't worry by the time Florida comes around. Okay, Rudy. Oh, don't worry. Florida's going to vote for their homeboy. Okay, Marco. Okay, Jeb, who didn't even make it to Florida. And by the way, some of these same people told Rubio to ignore Monmouth, to ignore us, that he was surging at the last minute. Surging, they told Marco Rubio. You're not going to be embarrassed. You're surging at the last minute. And that's it. Marco Rubio will never be president of the United States. When you lose your own home state in a presidential primary, you're done. It's not only, well, Kasich held on. He would not be able to do it now, though. He would not now. Yeah. Now because he got away with the grift for a while, Laura. Now he's been all over MSNBC. If he ever put his name on a ballot in Ohio again, he'd get trounced. Mr. Mailman Daddy. My daddy was a mailman. My daddy was a mailman. Good for you. Is that supposed to mean something? My dad did whatever he had to do to put food on our table. He dug post holes. He flipped burgers if he had to. He cooked eggs at 4 o'clock in the morning for people getting ready for the shift. He owned a soubrette stand. He did whatever he had to do. The man always had 5 jobs. I'm supposed to be impressed your daddy was a mailman with health benefits? My daddy didn't have health benefits, John. He reached into his pocket and pulled out cash and paid the good doctor. That's what he did. My daddy was a mailman. If I had to hear this guy say that one more freaking time, oh my God. And as it turns out, that advisor I couldn't stand likes to play with little boys. I knew there was something off about that dude, right? As it turns out, it was like this, pretty well-known secret, not secret. Karl Rove knew about it, apparently. Oh, everybody knows John, has his own sexual proclivities, and I didn't really want to judge him. And whoa. There's being gay, and then there's grooming little boys. There's a difference. But that goes to show you how some of those people, the Rove and companies, that goes to show you how they view all of that, that whole issue. So there it is. Look, what he's trying, I think, and that's a good question. Should he just ignore DeSantis? Well, no, because Team DeSantis isn't ignoring him. Their candidate is, but their surrogates and their smear merchants are not. And what I think Trump is doing is looking out more in the best interest of Ron DeSantis than anybody who's around Ron DeSantis. Because Barnes is right. What he's trying to do is say, listen, I got a lot more where this came from. You shouldn't even do it. Don't even do it. Let's just focus on beating the Democrats. And do I think he's going to do it and take the advice? I don't know. I mean, the donors would all have to call him and say no more. But there are always going to be some of those donors who know that Trump won't even pick up the phone for them anymore. So, the Ken Griffins, they're going to keep whispering in the ear. The Bigelows are going to keep whispering in his ear. The Ricketts, they're going to keep whispering in his ear because they can't pick up the phone and call Donald Trump. So a Trump presidency for them is actually worse than a Biden presidency. It is, because at least they still have access to certain people and certain lawmakers. When the president is in office and you are disliked by the president, doors close to you. And that's what this is really about with so many of these people. And it has to be said, because if you really did care about the future of the governor, the chances of him beating Trump are so slim. Maybe I'm not, it's not 100% locked for Trump because something could happen. And I don't even want to say it out loud and put it into the ether because I believe in the power of the spoken word. And I my conscience wouldn't want that. Things can happen. So it is still technically possible, but the risk is so great because the likelihood is so high that he's going to not even beat him, but drum him. At this point, he's going to drum him. God, if there was voting right now, it would be the end he would lose his power in legislative sessions. That's how badly he would politically neuter him. And if you really cared about his future, you would say, what are you doing? Bide your time, win over the MAGA bust vote. I mean, this was a no-brainer. Like a Trump DeSantis ticket was a no-brainer. And I know Trump likes the idea of a woman, a strong woman. He feels that there are some Republican women who are stronger than any of these guys are. They are. And I hate to say it. I think Trump's been Like Mike Davis was talking about on the show, I think Trump's been introduced to the weakness of the white Southern Republican male. They are the least backbone in this country. I know women with more backbone than these men. Amen. Amen. And they'll fight. They'll take it to the mat, claw your eyes out to get what they want. And these guys just bend over like a bunch of little, yeah, it's terrible. Just terrible. How many more congressional endorsements do you think Trump will get overall? What kind of number he has right now? I'd have to add them up, but I mean, he took basically the entire Florida delegation, all but one. I mean, it's a total bloodbath. In California, there's some open questions there, so I don't know. And of course, there are quite a few there. I mean, one, I can't see how he could, although politicians are dirtbags. They are. That's what they are. So they'll do it, and that's a great question, Hamilton. John, they'll do their look. Some of them are doing it for loyalty. Many of the other ones who DeSantis thought he was going to get during the trip to D.C., who didn't, are afraid. Not afraid, like afraid, but politically afraid. If they go against Trump, and he's so likely to win right now, everybody views this as like, it's basically over. He's so likely to win that they don't think it's worth it. They just don't. They're not going to die with Ron DeSantis, you know? So at the end of the day, it's possible that, you know, he cleans up. But there's been a lot of plans put in place by the GOP establishment to stop Trump, to prevent Trump from winning the primary. And if he does win the primary, to try to prevent him from winning the general election. That's why the Ricketts would not allow the Republican Governors Association to help all of these Republican governors who couldn't raise money. Right. So it's not only that they won't help you or give to you, or they'll throw you a buck, you know, chump change just to make it look like they're helping. It's not only that, but, you know, they make calls and say, don't help this person. So it gets to be very difficult. If you're a Kerry Lake, you have to deal with the donors you got around you. You're not going to get help from Ricketts and the RGA. They're not going to do it, even though Doug Ducey is supposed to be the head. He's a figurehead. He's a puppet of the big donors. You know, if you're Tim Michaels, you have to dip into your own pocket. And that's why Wisconsin was so much closer. Tim Michaels actually had some money, right? It was so much closer than Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. Doug Mastriano sat down with little boy Ricketts, had what he thought was a good conversation. And he looked right in Doug's face and said, you're a Trump guy and I can't help you. You're a nice enough guy, but you're a Trump guy. You're not my kind of guy. Can't help you. Why? Because Pennsylvania is the keystone state, quite literally. If you win Pennsylvania, it's over. You've won the presidency. If you're a Republican, you can still win as a Democrat and still lose the presidency. Very, very difficult to lose if you're a Republican, if you carry Pennsylvania. So what's their goal? What's their answer to that? Let Shapiro beat Mastriano. Don't give Doug any money. And Doug made his own mistakes. I'm not saying that. But I mean, when you're outspent in a media markets, the two major media markets like that in Pennsylvania, when you're outspent that badly, folks, it matters. Money matters. Not everybody is Donald Trump who can get away with not running, you know, like a traditional campaign. Tudor Dixon didn't raise much at all for well, I mean, 20 years ago, it would have been a decent haul. But nowadays it's not. And Gretchen Whitmer was always going to be one of the harder ones. RGA didn't lift a finger. Who'd they help? Brian Kemp. They helped Brian Kemp. Kerry Lake? Nope. So Lombardo is, though, however, an ally to Trump now. I actually did not think he was the most MAGA, but Lombardo is initiating reforms. If they pass in Nevada, then I actually think, and this is me saying this, I actually think the way the demographics are changing now, Trump is probably slightly favored to win Nevada. I do. Because I was right about Laxalt's support in Clark County. I was right about Lombardo's support in Clark County. The reason I didn't make a big deal out of the Trump +9 or something we got in Nevada is because Republicans tend to be overrepresented in polls in Nevada. It's happened in the past quite a bit. And that it would have been difficult. And I never polled it in 2020. I just told everybody it'd probably be somewhat close, but it's probably going to Biden. If I was right about their support in Clark County, then I'm right about Trump's support in Clark County. And even if Trump does worse in Washoe than our polling suggested he would do. And he did, by the way, outperform Lombardo and Laxalt and Washoe. But even still, even if he didn't, if he does that well in Clark County, it's 72% of the statewide vote. So we had Laxalt losing Clark County by about, 5 points, something like that. We had Lombardo losing it by like 3 or 4. That's exactly what happened. We had Trump. Give me a second. I'll show you. We got time, right? It's 2:05. Going on time. Well, you know what? We do. Give me 2 seconds. 2 seconds. 2 seconds. 2 seconds. Get to the point where I can show you without anything getting. It was a public polling project, correct? Battleground states. Nevada. Yep. There it is. So like I said, we had Nevada close, unlike some others that clearly had Laxalt winning. And I'm telling you, when things like the cameras go off and then a dump does not at all resemble what we had been seeing in similar vote batches, I tend to get a little skeptical. Okay. And that somehow only affect the Senate, not so much as the governor. Yeah, it stinks to high heaven to me, Laura. You know, it just stinks to high heaven to me.
But also remember how consistent every batch was coming in, and then
That's right.
This one?
That's right. It's exactly right. Where's the presidential race? What happened here? Did I not put it? Oh, I didn't put it on there because there it is. Presidential rematch. Governor right after that. So let me do the rematch first. Here we go. Let me close the editor. Well, let me save it. Save it. I mean, folks, it wasn't close at all. Let me add this to the stream and let it update. Come on, it's crossing with the most important issues by party. Proceed. Because anytime there's charts or anything, it's just basically updating the other charts that are attached to the crosstab. All right, so we're going to close the editor. We're going to pull this up. Let's go by region. How far can I go down? Pretty far. So here, actually, it was even bigger. It's a 10-point lead. We were not the only ones. I believe Emerson was 9 or 11 points. So was Rasmussen. It was Trump plus 9 or 11, something very similar to that in that ballpark. Let me make it bigger so you guys can see a little better. All right, and I know it's hard to see, but you can see it here, 48-38. It's a 10-point lead. In Washoe, Trump was leading by 4, but in Clark, look at that, 7-point lead in Clark. And in the rest of the state. How do I know? At first, I'm like, that's not possible, right? But we had Lombardo down by only about 3 and 2 or 3 in Clark. That's how much you lost it by. That's it. We had Laxalt down only a little bit, a couple of points in Clark. We were right. So look, if you wound up being 4 points more Democratic, it means Trump is technically up in Clark by about 4 points, which means he most definitely is going to carry the state of Nevada. I mean, that's going to happen. And what could that have been? Well, let's look it up. Let's race. Look at that. Just take a second to digest that. All the other Republicans were in the single digits with African Americans. I think 11 was Lombardo's, maybe something like that. Trump also was doing significantly better with whites, but it really comes down to the Hispanics. And it's a smaller sample, 138 people, but without a doubt, Trump was doing much better with Hispanics in Nevada than anybody else. So let's say we overstate Republican Hispanics. That makes sense. So 4 points, let's say Laxalt lost Clark by 5, 6, something like that. I don't think he did, but yeah, again, it would still mean Trump carries Clark by about 3, so just a massive swing, very much indicative of what we have seen in other areas, such as the national polling when we ask, did you vote for Biden or did you vote for Trump? And okay, now I voted for Biden. Who would you vote for now? It's usually about 8 to 12 points low end of 8, high end of 12, who were Biden voters in 2020 who now say, I would vote for Donald Trump. So that's not happening, by the way, in reverse. If you voted for Donald Trump, literally less than 2% say they're going to vote for Joe Biden. So, I mean, we're talking about a net gain of millions and millions and millions of votes, which answers that question. Some Martin had, how could he win a general election? I don't think so. I brought up, some of them I was talking about with the standard Martin, like the shine was on Biden, even though he had a record, and it's kind of ridiculous. Had a 40-year record in D.C. The media was very good at hiding that. Now he's the president. They can't. And the shine is off Joe Biden. His favorability rating sucks. So it's basically close to as bad as Hillary's. And Trump doesn't have to be better than this standard that we're putting up. He just has to be better than the other choice. And secondly, when it comes to this idea Trump can't win the independents, I mean, the last time Republicans carried independence was Donald Trump. So I really just don't know where these ideas come from. And then thirdly, is that Trump gets out a vote that nobody else can get out. And if you're under the mind, or you're under the impression that, I hear this pitch from donors all the time, they said, this is what we were told with DeSantis, like, he drives out Democrats. It's going to be an overwhelming Democratic turnout if it's Trump. Anyone is going to drive out Democrats. They are extremely enthusiastic, extremely certain to vote. It's an incumbent Democratic president. The last time Republicans made this argument, that was the argument for Mitt Romney, that if you have a Rick Santorum or somebody else, or Newt Gingrich or somebody else, then they're going to piss off, because they're so out of the mainstream. They're going to piss off these Democratic voters, and they're going to turn them out in bigger numbers. It could look more like 08. In the end of the day, partisans came out to defend their president, because that's what partisans do. And they did it for Trump as well. He turned Republicans out in droves. You're not going to get it easier. And that's essentially what they're trying to appeal to. Your desire to not fight, your desire to just kind of make it easy on yourself and hope that you have an easier road ahead with somebody else. That's BS. That's not going to happen. Democrats are going to fight tooth and nail. They're going to harvest every piece of paper they find to make it look like a vote. And the only way to counter that is to drive turnout up so high that it's not enough. It's not good enough. I think oh, go ahead, Laura.
I think you also should mention, they also want you to believe and be a defeatist and thinking, what's the point to vote? We're on YouTube, so I guess you can insinuate from that. But that is the ultimate goal, that they want you to be disenfranchised. What's the point? Yeah. You have to vote.
Honestly, Laura, I think if Trump consolidates everyone, if he is the nominee and he consolidates everyone, measuring that Trump or bust vote and how new it is, and how, because there's a lot of new vote in it, he could get anywhere between 93 upwards of 100 million votes. He could do it. I'm not kidding, which is insane to me, because what did he get the first time? 60 something, which was already a huge improvement. In 2016, it was such a big improvement over Romney. Actually, it was more. Yeah, it's more than that. Something like that. I'd have to go back and look, but combined, it was only like 120 million in 2020 or 2012, excuse me. Then in 2016, it was 137 million, something like that. And then this time it was damn near 160 million. So roughly ballpark. I really think we could see 93 to 100 million votes for you better get it, because I think Joe Biden is going to get an obscene amount of votes. I do. Because we're dealing with the hive. We're not dealing with the typical, we're not it's just not that typical anymore. And I'm trying, again, like Laura, I'm on YouTube, so I'm trying to be careful. Russ says, where's the example of someone debating Trump and it benefiting them? Where does DeSantis get this idea? Someone will bully Trump off the stage. This is Russ, you really got it. They do believe this is going to somehow turn on Trump once they start getting closer to being head to head and they get on debate stages. And I don't know what the hell you're talking about. I don't know what on earth would make you think that's going to happen. You know what's going to happen? I'm going to save this before I go. there's going to be a comparison of the two men standing up there. One is going to look extremely authentic, and the other one's going to look like he's attempting to mimic the authentic one. Do you want me to give you a peek into the future of the Republican presidential debate? You think they're not going to notice you took classes to see how you move your hands and act? I actually think it's going to go terrible.
Authenticity classes are telling.
I'll leave it at that. With that in mind, don't forget to support the Public Polling Project. The link is in the description. Contribute, share it far and wide. We'd very much appreciate it. The bigger the contributor base we have, the less individual people have to contribute. All right? That's basically math. Go ahead to social media, vote in the polls, tell us what you think. Actually, real quick, before I go, let's take a look and see where everyone is. Let's go to Twitter, and I'll give you I'll give you some results from Twitter. I'll give you some results from Truth. And it's funny because Locals was like immediately state polling. And on Locals, we have so far, and by the way, you don't have to be a supporter to vote on Locals. You could just be a member. Sign up to the Locals community, peoplespundit.locals.com. You'll get things first. All right. You would have been the first person in the country to know that DeSantis was now falling into the low 20s, threatening to fall below 20, and Trump was on his way north of 55, on his way to 60. You would have been the first one to know that because people on Locals get polling first and get insights that I don't put anywhere else. So far on Locals, 68. Is it still the same? Yep. 68.8% said they would prefer state polls. 22.7% said they would prefer national polls. And the poll read like this. Poll regarding the presidential primaries. Are you more interested in national or state polls at this time? And there's a lot of great comments if you want to read them on the bottom. And let's see where we're at with Twitter. Twitter is 60 with 1,000. Somebody else vote, please. I hate that. Oh, Laura. 1,666 votes in 2 days left, by the way. 67.8% say they would rather see state polls. 22% would rather see national polls. 10% were unsure. 8.5 was unsure on the Locals page. Going to Getter. Let's check out Getter. With how many votes were cast so far in Getter? About 193. Neck and neck, basically. 48.7% say state polls. 45.1% say national polls. 6.2% are unsure. All right, smaller sample, though, and that's definitely going to have an impact. Smaller sample on Truth. 129 people so far have voted. So, I have almost 2,000 votes on Twitter. So combined, we're looking at about 3,000 probably. State polls is at 49%. National polls is at 40%. 12% unsure. All right. Just to look at something that the Virginia Project, who did, very much worth following that handle on Twitter. But national polls of a contest that is determined at the state level provides low quality information. I think I tend to agree with that when it comes to presidential races. I will still poll nationally, but I really feel like the battleground states where the Electoral College has decided, that's the way, that's the way I like to poll. However, when it comes to just that it's this early, I do think national polling has value because it really is going to show you where the states are. It does. So, Trump cannot have a 30, 35 point lead and then the DeSantis push polls be correct. That's why you saw the public polls show Trump with just enormous leads. Somebody on Local said, I would really love to see state level polls in traditional blue states that have a lot of delegates. And I agree with that idea. Like Massachusetts, for instance, very interested to see that poll. Trump has a 40-something point lead. There are delegates in Massachusetts. He crushed it in Massachusetts in 2020. I'm talking about in the regular presidency, in certain neighborhoods that are traditional blue-collar Democratic neighborhoods. He got a lot of votes for a Republican, even though the margin was still big for a Democrat. He got a lot of votes that in any other year, honestly, could have threatened to carry Massachusetts against a normal Democratic turnout. It was massive. And we saw that in places like Illinois. Chicago, Illinois. The man put up the votes. So I'm curious myself. I think that was a really good, what about Connecticut? What about, even though it's not as many delegates, Massachusetts has more. What about New York State? Obviously, I did see the Siena poll. It's a monstrous lead for Trump. But I get your point, and I love the idea. I do. All right. So we got 2 days left. Take the poll. We'll decide what we're going to do by the time those 2 days are over. Friday, we'll go over where we're at with the questionnaire right now. It will change depending whether or not it's national or at state level. All right. Thanks for watching Inside the Numbers. I'm going to biz out here and check out the links in the description as always. Thanks to our sponsors for supporting us. Thank you to you for supporting our sponsors. And we will see you guys on Friday. Right?
Freewheeling Friday.
Oh, and I forgot. Jam and Bean. I forgot. jamandbean.com, the promo code TPP40. Use it on your on a new subscription on Jam and Bean for coffee, delicious popcorn, whatever. You will get 40% off that initial subscription. Plus, when you renew, you still get 10% off. All right. I was waiting for everybody to clarify what was on the docket today, Laura, and the only one I knew for sure was 4 Patriots. So we did that, and then I even left more time to come back and didn't. All right, thanks everybody for watching. I will see you. Oh, check out the interview with Charlie Kirk.
Oh, yes.
Good interview. Check it out. All right. There were clips of it on Real America's Voice, but you definitely should go back and listen to that episode. And I'm in the second hour.
Yeah.
That was an important interview. Very important interview.
And I'm also going to be sharing the Talk of the Town interview on Twitter Getter
Locals.
and Truth and Locals, of course.
Locals. Yeah. All right. All the best, folks. We will see you Friday.
Deuces.
Friday. Deuces.
How much you wanna bet that I can get you back inside your head before the summer ends and spread a little love. Just for a little fun, I'll make you come back to me before the rise of every sun. Baby, it's meant to be. I know you got a man, but he don't understand. You're gonna be a heartbreaker. You're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette. 'Cause I just wanna